This is the last in this series of 4, the theme that I've been talking about this month, what if? And today, our topic is, what if you were never at risk? And I chose this before the events of last week. I have to tell you, I chose it at the beginning of the month. Just happens. But it's been an interesting month, hasn't it? It's given us lots to think about when we start thinking of what if in terms of the significant, the important areas of our lives. In fact, more than one of you has said to me, so I took that and I started thinking about ... in my life, which is exactly what this is intended to do. Not just the 4 items that you've been offered here, but to take that and expand on it and really get the juice out of it for your own life. So, anybody want to tell us about an experience briefly that you've had this month with what if? I'll turn the recorder off if you tell me to. Otherwise, I'll leave it on. Something that you've been called to kind of explore with the concept of what if. Okay, we'll talk afterward. See, talking about it may be risky, right? I mean, it's new. It's once we put it out there, then we're more likely to feel pressure to follow through on it. Whether it's an idea, a desire, a choice. Once we put legs on it, so to speak, we're likely to feel responsible to take the risk. And that may not feel so comfortable. So today I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what if you were never at risk? What if you could take bold, energetic, creative action in a variety of areas of your life and not feel threatened? Wouldn't that be exciting? Wouldn't that be satisfying? Sure. Well, of course it would. So I want to share 3 examples with you this morning. These are true life stories of people stepping out and taking bold, energetic, and creative actions to improve their lives. The people in each of these stories not only said, what if? They made it so. So here's story number 1. Not too long ago, a commercial ran on TV sponsored by American Express. And this commercial showcased the Amex Members Project. It's titled, Taking Charge of Making a Difference. And it's the story of a group of people who live in central Harlem in New York City. They describe their living conditions as having been pretty hopeless, especially for children, and that trying to do anything to change that was very risky. And if you've ever been in New York City and you've ever driven through Harlem, you know what that's about. So there was a lot of talking about making changes, but no one was doing anything about it. Then the Amex Members Project came into being, and residents started making changes, one step at a time. Actually, it was 1 block at a time. Parents were offered support in getting their children to school and especially to sponsored activities. And the parents were promised that if they would participate in taking charge of making a difference with their own children, they were guaranteed that their children would graduate from college. That's quite a promise, don't you think? But one by one, first individuals, and then block by block, families began to take the risk. First, one family, one child, then one block stepped up. The project managers continued to know and to say, there is no act too small to make a difference. And block by block, children were getting and taking educational opportunities. At last count, this project has spread through 97 blocks in central Harlem. And it has over 10,000 children participating in the program. The manager's motto is this: failure is simply not an option. And because, as Ernest Holmes says, we simply do not allow negative thoughts to control our consciousness. See, it's one thing to have them, it's another to let them control our consciousness. Instead, Holmes says, we greet the divinity in everyone we meet, and we demonstrate the power of spiritual realization in everyday life. When we believe this, we can take risks without being at risk. You see the difference? We can take risks without being at risk. So here's the second story. This one may sound familiar to one or two of you. And if it does, just sit back, enjoy it again, and know that we are sharing it with others for whom it's brand new. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, there is a Goodwill store. And this is the story of one of their cashiers named Arlene. Arlene is smart, articulate, and thankful these days for that job. Arlene is raising 3 children and just recently remarried. Her new husband's name is Vincent. So far, sounds like an ordinary story with ordinary people, right? But there's one significant difference. Arlene is legally blind and has been since birth. A cashier? Really? It's fascinating that most of her customers don't even notice that the cashier checking them out can't see like they can. She can see shapes and colors and often uses a magnifying glass to identify denominations. And with some coins, Arlene can identify the value by feeling around their edge. And while she's doing that, she says, I talk to the customer, I ask about their families, I ask them how their day is going. I absolutely love it, she says. Most of my customers are so friendly and so sweet and so welcoming. I just love it here. I have a big loyalty here. And behind all this is the pride that she feels by working. Just like everyone, she said in an interview with a staff reporter from the Coeur d'Alene Press newspaper. There's a wonderful feeling to know I earned those dollars. Well, let me tell you where I heard this story. When I was with the Foothill Center for Spiritual Living in Arcadia, California, there were 2 members of the congregation there, Anita and Randy, and we were privileged to be a part of their lives as they routinely took on tasks that most of us would never even have considered in our own lives. Because both Anita and Randy were blind. Anita had been since she was about 14 years old. And Randy began to lose his sight in his early 20s. Both of them worked and provided service, valuable service to others, like Arlene. They both had seeing eye dogs, and they helped in the training of seeing eye dogs, both with the dog handlers and with the potential clients, because this was something they were so good at. And I will tell you also that Anita worked for the Veterans Administration out in West Los Angeles, which for her was a 3-hour ride both ways, or each way, each day, by an individual carrier that transported her. But she worked with veterans who had lost their sight or were losing their sight in a retraining program so that they could be productive in their lives. And both Randy and Anita have studied the science of mind for many years. In fact, they both finished first-year practitioner training with me the last year that I was at Foothill Center. So when the story about Arlene was told, it had particular meaning for that congregation, just as it does here. But the additional meaning there was that Arlene is the daughter of Don and Bonnie Simons, who were members there at the Foothill Center during the time that I was minister. And that's where I heard the story one morning. And I have to tell you, it came up in Standing in the Light, that they were able to tell this story about her. Ernest Holmes encourages us to feel a unity of spirit in all people and running through all events. He reminds us to declare the Spirit within us and to take the right action in everything we touch. And that's touch, touch, touch. What we touch with our hands, what we see with our eyes, what we hear with our ears. This, he says, brings out the best in all of our experiences. The greatest good one's mind is able to conceive should be affirmed daily as a part of our experience. So once again, it's not about being at risk. It's about being willing to take a risk, knowing that we can demonstrate the power of spiritual connection with our source, and which will, within us, express in everyday life. It's not just esoteric, it's the practical application of this in our everyday lives. And when we can believe this, then we can take risks without being at risk. So here's the third story. This is another real life experience that I witnessed in my ministry. When I was the minister at the Porterville Spiritual Enrichment Center in Central California, we had an annual committed giving program. And every year, by January, the members would sign committed giving pledges in order to support the center in budgeting its annual operating costs. As you know, all of our centers are chartered by Centers for Spiritual Living. However, we are independent operators. Each one of us is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, as designated by the federal government, and each of us is incorporated, or whatever the state, or in the case of province in Canada, permits. in the state of Hawaii, we are incorporated as a nonprofit church. So as such, we are also financially independent, which means our exclusive form of support is from our members, friends, students, plus any events we should provide, which are for the purpose of supporting the center in participation or by individual endowments. So the practice of committed giving pledges is important to our operations in order that we know what's available to spend. In rent, the minister's salary, in advertising and promotion, as well as office supplies, equipment, class materials. Those all come with a price tag, even in ministry. In our larger centers, add to that their clerical help, their musical performers, their guest speakers, their varied events that carry a price tag. So, in any event, in late November of this particular year at the Porterville Spiritual Enrichment Center, I was describing to the audience that they were welcome to pick up their pledge packets and that we would be mailing those who weren't able to pick theirs up in person. I also stressed the importance of pledges being in place by the first of the year so the Board of Trustees could complete the annual budget. And as I completed this announcement, a young woman who was a frequent attendee on Sundays raised her hand. And as I acknowledged her, she stood up and she said, "I was going to save this for standing in the light, but I think now is the time for me to speak." Last year, she said, when it was time to fill out a pledge card, I was very nervous about making a financial commitment because I was afraid I might not be able to keep it. However, she said, I took the card home, I prayed about it, and what came to me was that simply pledging a minuscule amount was like admitting that I could not create or maintain a comfortable income. At the time, she said I was only working part-time and not even guaranteed that. And I thought, I don't want to let my spiritual center down, and I don't want to let myself down either. But right on the heels of those troublesome thoughts, she said, came the realization, change your thinking, Charlene, and change your life. So on the basis of trusting in the positive thought, she decided to pledge a 10% tithe of her income that she intended to make that next year. She said she knew it was a reach, but she also knew that she wanted to do it. Take the risk. So as she looked around the room at friends and relatives and two of her children who were sitting there listening to this whole story, she said, I want to share with you today that I exceeded the income level I had chosen to tithe 10% of last month, October. And these next 2 months of this year enable me to exceed my pledge significantly as well. I really get this, she said. I'm a walking example of it. Well, needless to say, the room broke out in applause, followed by hugs and pats on the back. True story. So we all have challenges in our lives, and we all face risks along the way. We all have innumerable opportunities to ask ourselves the question, what if? And allow the answer to play out in our minds before we take action. Either to move ahead, turn back, or stay where we are. But what if when we or anyone for that matter, faces the opportunity to take a risk at something? What if first we sought the support of a professional spiritual mind treatment prayer practitioner, one who has dedicated his or her life, their time, their energies, their intelligence, to saving others through, or serving others through uncovering God in every person? What if that changed the world for good, for better, for best? And so it is.